Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Day in the Life. I'm Priya, and this is my co host Rajiv. And today we have with us Raghu.
A very
Hi.
special guest. So he needs not a long introduction, but I'll give one anyway. So Raghu is a string theorist, currently a senior research scientist at Stanford, but he will be starting next year faculty at the International Center for Theoretical Sciences in Bangalore, in the TIFR Institute. Um, and before that, he was a postdoctoral student at Princeton, joint with Princeton and the Institute for Advanced Study. And then before that, he did his PhD at Stanford, master's in Cambridge, bachelor's in, started off at IIT Delhi and then went to MIT. And he hates it when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He was ranked number one in the JEE exam in 2006. So without further ado, welcome, Raghu. Really, really good to have you. How are you feeling?
Thanks, Raj. Thanks, Priya. I'm feeling good. Good
Yeah, thank you
to
so
be
much.
on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for making time to do this. Super exciting. I think, like Rajiv mentioned, you're going to start at ICTS in
Yeah.
Bangalore soon.
Mm-hmm.
So since you have a lot going on in that sense, how are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling good. I feel like the string theory group, which is my research field at ICTS, is really great. Like there are some very good colleagues there, and the institute gets some of the best students from India. So I'm
Mhm.
really excited to start my journey there and be part of the good institution.
Mhm. Have you ever been to Bangalore before? Have you ever lived in Bangalore
I have
before?
not lived in Bangalore, but I have visited this institute and spent like a month at a time, couple of times there. So I know
Mhm.
the place well. It's a small institute, kind of far from the city a little bit, so it takes a while to get there.
Mhm.
So it's in the around it there are just some farms and small villages. So
Yeah,
nice quiet place to do physics.
yeah, it is very beautiful. I've been to ICTS once. I am from Bangalore, so
Oh,
I know that we take the shuttle from IISc to
right.
ICTS, and it's a beautiful, like the city at one point stops, and then it's just
Yeah,
forests,
yeah.
farmland sort of vibe, and then you get to this place where everybody's quietly doing physics. So
Mm-hmm,
it is
mm-hmm.
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it similar to the institute at Princeton, like the sort of monastery vibe?
It's a little bigger than that, like because the institute doesn't have PhD students, whereas we do. And I think, yeah, the groups are a little bit bigger than the one at IAS. But yeah, I would say it's a little different because the students really make a difference. So you're also teaching, and
Mm,
there are courseworks and things like that. Like
Mhm.
we have interviews for PhD admissions and also hiring postdocs. So
nice. Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and I think speaking of hiring and getting postdocs, we'll talk about all the technical work in a little bit. But I actually wanted to start off and ask you, since this is a day in the life and we're talking about what it's like, what part of what part of your work outside of the technical aspects is excites you the most?
yeah, I think so. Our field, like I think in general, any type of mathematical research or mathematical physics research involves talking to your colleagues a lot, like talking to your students or fellow postdocs or faculty, and you're just bouncing around ideas quite a bit because we are not really using that much computing power, at least in the specific things that I do. So one of the tricky parts is to find a problem which is sort of interesting enough so that people will care about it, but yet like you could solve it using some reasonable amount of uh, like in a reasonable amount of time and also using the tools that you have. So for that, like you really need to discuss a lot with people. And so I like that a lot because I think I just like talking with people. And I think, like, for example, right now at Stanford, there's a big group of postdocs and we get
Oh,
lunch every day and we are like discussing papers from the archive over lunch, and if there's a conference going on, what talks were at the conference. Like usually they record all the talks anyway,
Right.
so I think that's really fun because you learn a lot by talking to people. Like it's much more efficient way. Like if somebody has already understood something, and you can question them and cross question them. So it so the it, it's a little bit technical in the discussions, but it's also social because you get to then also chat about other things. Like you're sitting at the lunch table for like an hour and a half and just talking.
Hmm.
How big is the group of people that meet up roughly every day? Like, are we talking about like three
Maybe
people or
around
10 people or
10, maybe 10 people,
10 people?
something of that
Dang.
order. Sometimes it's 15, but yeah, something like that.
Are you all
Wow.
working on similar problems? Like,
Yeah,
or
so these 10 people are working on problems that we may not be collaborating, but
hmm.
our discussions are mutually intelligible. So, like,
Hmm.
we can
Oh,
learn from each other.
hmm.
Some
Okay.
people are also collaborating, amongst those 10 people and so on. But
Hmm.
Hmm.
yeah,
Nice.
so I think that's really fun.
You mentioned talking to a lot of people, and I think my next question is sort of related to this. But so, how did you know, or how did you choose between theory and experiment? At what point were you sure that you were
Yeah.
going down either one of those
Well,
paths?
I think it was already clear, like in high school, because unfortunately, the school that I went to in India, um, math is, that's also why like theoretical physics is much more cutting edge in India rather than experimental physics, I would say, because just the training in schools is much more just bookish.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like students don't really go to that many physics labs or chemistry labs. Science is kind of just taught in a classroom from a
Mm-hmm.
textbook and you do the math.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when I went to the physics Olympiad at the end of high school, like it was very hard. So there's in that exam, there's like a theoretical component and an experimental component.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the students from India who are like really good in the theoretical part are like really struggling with the experimental side of things because they have just never played with equipment in a lab before.
Hmm.
So I just think because of my training, like experiment was never really like an option.
Hmm.
And maybe I should have explored it more when I was an undergrad at MIT, but it kind of didn't really get
Okay.
a head start on that.
But we talked about this a little bit, a few years ago, where you were saying like you did do a little bit of you have to do labs as part of your courses, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying like you think that every theorist should at least spend a little bit of time in the lab. Do you still feel that way, or like at
Yeah,
some
I
point in
think
their
as an
career?
undergrad, you should have a lab component, and it's a good to for the labs to be part of the undergraduate curriculum. Like we did have that at MIT, but somehow, even having a lab course is not the same as getting some experience working in a lab. Because I
Hmm.
think, as you probably know,
Yeah.
Rajiv, you worked in the lab. It's very different. Like being involved in the day-to-day level of like setting up the equipment, setting up that optical bench, aligning that laser, all that stuff is very different than doing a designed experiment in like 2 hours in a class. So in some sense, there are some schools that do have this, like Princeton University, for example, the students who do physics PhDs there, they have to do an experimental project as a part of their PhD.
Oh.
So they have to spend like a few months working in some lab and writing a report and so on. But I think at that point, it's one of these things where, you know what you like and you kind of want to go with your flow.
Interesting. You did mention Princeton PhD students having to do an experimental component, but apart
Yeah.
from that, what do you think can bridge that gap? Because, like you said,
Hmm.
courses, even if you have lab courses, like even I've had lab courses in school,
Yeah.
they're very cookie cutter, and you start with an aim and then you try to do some things and then you have
Yeah.
observations, and that's that.
Yeah.
It's not, it's in no way representative of what actual lab work
Hmm.
can entail.
Hmm.
So, how would you
I,
bridge?
I think it's hard for a professional physicist to do both. It's just not
Hmm.
possible these days.
Hmm.
But I do think there are people who sort of sit at a borderline, like their research is kind of mathematical or data analysis, but they are looking at the experimental data. So maybe they're not like talking directly to the experiment. So like a good example of this is the LIGO experiment, where they observe some data from gravitational waves, and they make the data public after some time, and then anyone can analyze it. So I think astrophysics is one of the fields where this is very common, where serious researchers stare at the data quite a bit and they think about the numbers, what's coming out, and so on, because it is an experimentally driven field. In particle physics, that was true a lot more, in the 70s, when particle physicists were trying to explain data coming out of colliders and so on. Well, it's still true. Like there are many people like that at CERN, but there hasn't been like quite a revolution in particle physics in a while. So there are, and I'm sure like in quantum information theory, like there are people who sort of actually think about quantum devices and how to build them and think more theoretically about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, our last episode we had Juhi Singh, and she works in quantum optimal control. So she was also saying she is a theorist, and she sits with the experimentalists to try and understand like how
Yeah.
their devices can produce the
Yeah,
optimal
so I think
control
it really
stuff that's
depends
needed.
on kind of the job you're in. Like some kind of physics requires you to be closer to experiment, whereas in what I do, it's not really necessary. At least at this stage, it's not necessary. But there are people, like I said, who work in cosmology, who work in astrophysics, who are more closer to me, who are definitely like their day job is like looking at data and finding ways of analyzing it. And recently people have actually done some good research in those areas. Like there are some results that are very nice.
Nice. Well, jumping a little bit, so you've worked, well, you mentioned a few people, you worked with many different people. Who would you say is the most interesting person you've collaborated with?
Interesting in what way?
In whatever way you want.
Well, I think so. I have had the good fortune of like writing papers with these two very famous physicists, like Juan Maldacena and Ashok Sen. And I would say that both of them share this quality that they just calculate a lot of things. Like even though they are more senior physicists, they don't just give the calculations to their student or their postdoc. They are actually working things out for themselves, and that's what keeps them sharp and keeps them uh, not just smart, but also just to really know something deeply, you have to work it out for yourself. So I think both of them sort of have that quality where they're like non-stop, like computing things and not just dealing with ideas, just like say something that, and like don't try to work out the details. So I think I have learned a lot from that attitude. Plus, like there is this other thing of just commitment and sheer hard work, like and discipline in some sense. They have sort of very set daily schedules. Like Juan will come into the office at like 8 o'clock in the morning. He'll stay there 6 p.m. But you know that those 10 hours that he's spending in the office, like every moment of it, he's like productive. He's like, so I think it's just that seeing these, basically these two would be like, I would say one of the top three thing theorists. These are like the two of them. And so that has taught me a lot in terms of, just attitude towards a research career.
But
Like how you
do
should,
you do that now? Do you come in like, 8, leave it, or do you have like a
no,
set routine or?
no.
What does your
But
routine look like?
I guess it's a little bit, it's fairly, it's not like every day I go at 8, but I go reach office somewhere between 8 and 9. I'm reading papers, I'm doing calculations, I'm talking to PhD students, other postdocs. We do this lunch thing. Then from Mondays and Fridays, there's a seminar. Uh, the postdocs organize the seminars. We think about who to invite, who would be an interesting person to invite to Stanford. Then we go out to dinners with them. Yeah, that's basically the routine. And yeah.
But man, I gotta, because you spoke about like, I go in and I read papers.
Yeah.
I gotta tell the story. I don't even know if you'll remember this, but so I used to visit Raghu while he was at the institute in Princeton, And there's one time, like the first time I went, he like, it's the campus housing. It looks really nice, but you know how like oftentimes when I suppose like we are looking online and we see a paper, we're like, oh, we should really read this, right? So we'll like save it or whatever. So we have like a list of papers we should read. And I go to Raghu's house, and he has like stacks of printed papers, just printed papers everywhere, right? And I was like, oh, so like, okay, I get it. Like, I also like reading papers, right? So I was thinking, like, yeah, he probably like prints those papers to read later. But then I was like, oh man, that's pretty old school. And then I asked him like, so how many of these papers have you read, right? And we're talking like stacks, right? And he looks at I remember you were like a little bit confused, and you were like, oh, these papers? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I've read all of them, right? And I was like, man, that's
I
when I knew
can't
like he's
remember that. I'm sure
different.
you're making this up.
No, for real. And then you pointed to like a smaller stack, and you were like, yo, that's what I'm reading now, right? So he just had like these stacks of papers, and I was like, man, this guy's a beast. I feel like I'm totally the type to be like, okay, I should read papers. And I was like, you will just actually sit and read, because I've seen you do that too. I've just seen you being like, all right, and just grab like two papers and sit and
Yeah.
just like go through them, right?
Yeah, I still
Like,
print papers, like I have a lot of stacks of papers, but I sort of collect them like books, like I staple them nicely, and then like I had the same printed papers in Princeton, and when I moved to Stanford, I just shipped all of them. So it's like
but
I'm not
like,
treating, but like yeah, I'm just treating them like books and keep them.
Is it
but I
just
think
a
it's just
sheet
like,
of
I don't know.
paper? Is that why you print them out?
It's also like, the surface area of the paper is a lot bigger. Like I can have five papers open, and whereas just like thumbing myself through like an iPad screen is just,
Yeah, okay.
I don't get it. I have some collaborators that are younger, and they have just like one iPad. They don't even like use a laptop anymore. This guy's
Wow.
like doing his Zoom call on the iPad, all his notes on the iPad, his calculations on the iPad, his papers on the iPad, and I just don't get that 11-inch screen. Like it's just too small. I don't
I feel called out.
know.
Oh, is that what you do?
Yeah, it's always just all tab, 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 tab between the many screens. There's the
Man,
simulation
Yeah,
running, but it
Raghu,
works.
it's the new
it
generation,
works.
man.
Maybe it
We're
works. Yeah, I'm not criticizing. It's just not for me. I just can't.
we're getting old. We can't
Yeah,
we can't handle the new technology, man. But
yeah.
yeah, no, but I was like, man, that guy. So I don't know. That's why I felt like Raghu, like really, like he just there's no shortcuts. Like he was like I feel like I was inspired by that. I was like, man, you just gotta like sit and just read and understand. Like, and I don't know. I'm sure it takes everybody time, but he just sits and does it. I was like, this guy is a different animal, man.
But I think it's also
Like,
like, in experiment, maybe you need to read papers, but maybe not like as much as in math, right, or theoretical physics, because you also just have to do your experiment, and there's some
yeah,
details to be figured out and setting up the stuff. So I think just the nature of the work is also such, right? Because in experiment, you might not care about, let's say, an experimental paper that was done 25 years ago, because now the technology is just so outdated that, you
yeah.
just don't care about it. And so, but if somebody proved a math theorem 25 years ago, it's still a theorem. So you have to read papers from like 70s, 60s, or sometimes even 1890s or something, like,
Hmm.
because like the math that is proven. Like you only improve upon it. Like it's not like the technology gets outdated. It's just
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know how many you think all theoretical. I'm like honestly, be honest. Like out of all, I mean, not like let's forget the top class ones. Do you think like all theoretical physicists will sit and read papers from like the 60s and 70s, or do you think it's like a must? Like, man, you ain't got no choice. Like, you got to do this.
Well, I think, yeah, everybody, I think, reads papers, but it maybe the difference is like whether they read papers just for the specific project they're doing or the things they're interested in, versus having a more broader interest, in knowing more about the field itself. Like, so I
Hmm.
think at some point, like a breadth component comes in where uh, I feel I like just knowing stuff, even though it's not directly useful to my research. So maybe that's why I read slightly more papers than other people, but like everybody needs to sort of, you know, yeah, if you're doing some math thing, like you need to know what has been done before, and sometimes like you just need to go all the way back. And
Hmm.
also sometimes what happens is some threads of research kind of stop. Like there are some topic in which papers have been written, let's say from like 2001 to 2005. And for some reason, that field just people didn't think about that certain topic because maybe at that time it wasn't exciting anymore. But then suddenly 20 years later, people get a new idea. And then, that thread that had sort of stopped in 2005 is now revived in like 2024. So then you have no option but to read those papers from 2001 to 2005, right, to understand what those people had done. I think maybe this kind of a thing is less common in research areas where technology is the driving factor, because if a technology is promising, usually there'll be enough people pushing it to its logical conclusion, and then maybe not. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I was thinking about this because I feel like it's maybe like a smaller microcosm because I think you still can get some ideas from older techniques, or maybe I should say like certain techniques also last for a while. Like if you're, I don't know, I'm gonna say something pretty, I think quite niche, but if you're in like cavity QED and you have a pound driver hall locking, like that thing will be around for like several more years. So I think there are still techniques that are around, but I think like you said, maybe like I don't, if I can sit and read the pound driver hall paper once, but I don't have to sit and understand and prove all the theorems that are in there. I have
Yeah,
to like go to the lab and do the
you
laser
just have to
locking
do the
myself, right?
lock, right? You just have to.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
So maybe it's a bit different, but
Yeah,
yeah, I just think I don't know. I was just impressed at like the volume at which you not. And it was not just like reading just for sake of reading. Like you have to sit and read and understand this paper. Like it's just it's just like I think
yeah,
that's sort of one of the components that sets apart people, right? It's like
yeah,
how much are you willing to sit and read and just understand like
yeah,
chunky pieces of physics, right?
yeah.
And okay, I'm actually really curious here because we've been talking about the depth of knowledge
Hmm.
in a particular area. Raghu, do you also venture to, uh, I mean, associated fields of not just physics, but have you ever? I just want to get your view on. Is that ever helpful? It's a pretty general question, but
You mean, can you give me an example, like what kind of other field you are thinking about?
like, do you think that you can draw insights from other fields? Could be in physics, but then not specifically string theory. It could also be outside of physics. Could I'm
Yeah,
just yeah. And
yeah.
have you?
I think
18th century Brazilian history. I don't
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
no. Well, I think there are certain fields definitely outside of string theory that within physics, though, I would say that help
Mhm,
string theory. For example,
mhm,
a big idea recent times has been the use of tools from quantum information theory in quantum
mhm,
gravity. So
mm,
that is actually quite famously, people have made a lot of progress even in the last 10 years.
mhm,
And even some of my work was using some of those tools.
mhm,
Uh, Sometimes ideas from solid state physics are useful in string theory. So
mhm,
having that breadth is certainly useful.
mm,
Yeah, to be conversant in, but there is a limit to this. Like, for example, I don't think biology helps us much,
mm. How-
or like Brazilian history helps us much. So
Hey, you
there is
never
a
know,
limit to
man.
it. Yeah, but also one has to be, careful in, yeah, in basically you have to spend your time wisely, right? You only have a
Yeah, I was
finite
gonna
amount
say
of
like
time.
you give it
So that
infinite
is
time,
why,
sure you can read
yeah,
whatever, but
but that's why like having really good colleagues helps, because if I'm trying to learn about quantum information, one way is like I open a book and I learn everything from it, but that's a slow process. Whereas if I just need some particular thing and I have some expert in quantum information on my floor, I can just go talk to them, right? And
Mhm,
talking is much more efficient. So in
mhm,
that sense, being surrounded by colleagues who are knowledgeable and who you can have, who you can understand, who understand you, I mean,
mhm,
technically is very important.
mhm,
So that's why, like, communication becomes like an important thing, because if somebody is like not good at expressing their ideas or not good at listening to your question, and they just like start telling you facts rather than, really listening to your question and sort of giving a pointed
Mm,
response. So it is definitely true that scientists and especially theoretical physicists, I think, could improve upon their these kinds of communications, because that sort of increases the efficiency of the output of the department or the whatever.
Fair. You're
facts.
telling us a lot of things about your process in general, about the
Hmm.
way you communicate, and then the depth, and then the hard work. How would you describe the transition between um, when you were learning science in high school to then your undergraduate? And Rajiv did
Hmm.
plug that you were rank one when you took the
Hmm.
JEE, which is a pretty big deal in India. So, and then after that to now to the science and research you're doing now. So, what has that journey looked like?
uh, well, I think if it was I was doing something like experimental physics or something that, let's say it was like even machine learning research or something, it would be a bit different. But sort of mathematical physics kind of flows nicely from JE into undergrad and masters, because we are learning electrostatics and Maxwell's equations and so on in the JE as well. So in some sense, for me, the continuity, I've been lucky that in this field, because it's taught to young students like math and calculus and trigonometry and coordinate geometry, probability, like all these tools you are learning in high school, and you just keep using them. So, but if you, let's say, go into, I don't know, let's say mechanical engineering, and now you need to learn about car engines or batteries or something, then I think that's a bit different, because you don't really talk about that at least for me, it was not talked about in 11th and 12th class, right? Or if you're doing laser experiments, like people haven't really seen lasers in their high school, I think, not at least where I was doing high school. So, so yeah, so I think people who are in different, like let's say people, who even, let's say, go into finance, for example, after undergrad, for them, like the transition, you do have to spend a few months trying to train yourself in that new set of tools, some new ways of thinking. But yeah, but if it was, you get to pretty advanced levels of math, right, in high school. Like calculus is not easy. Like you even do multivariable calculus, things like that.
Hmm.
And theoretical physics is just using all of those things. And then undergrad is just piling up on that knowledge, and you kind of continue from there.
But then what about when you get into like a research, going from undergrad to like your PhD research? Is it also a little bit of a continuation?
Yeah, it is, because like, in our research, what are we trying to do? Like many times a whole paper could just be about calculating this really intricate integral. Okay, so that's just calculus, right? You're just doing integration, like your high school teacher gave you an easy problem, and research is just a harder integral. So, okay, you can try
It's
to do that.
it's
You make
just
it
math.
sound so
Oh,
simple.
that's
Sorry?
man.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Priya. You said
I mean,
you
that's
what
No,
were you
no,
basically
saying?
why,
wait
like,
for the story. I want to know.
No, yeah, she said you make it sound so simple. And yeah, it's true. I had another story because it reminded me of another story where you remember the Andrew Ng course we took together.
yeah.
So we took this machine learning course at Stanford when we were together there, and it was just like an aside from our PhD. And we actually did a project together and stuff. It was super fun, but we had a midterm exam. You remember this? Do you remember this, Raghu?
I probably don't remember, but
Man, I can't
I
believe you guys
remember
remember.
the
Okay,
midterm. It was a bit hard.
well, okay, there. This is what I'm talking about. So it was hard, right? So we get out of that midterm. I'm like, I'm trash, right? I'm just like, I'm terrible at this midterm. And Raku, he's like, it was actually just very, very mathematical, right? So it was much less like practical. Ultimately, the course was very practical because we did the project. But Roku was like, man, yeah, I don't think it was a particularly like constructive midterm because it was like just math, right? And yeah, it was hard. And we say, okay, yeah, it was hard. Then we get the results. Man, okay, so I got like a 30%, right? I just totally bombed that exam. People were getting like 50 to 70%. And we're like, so Raghu, what you get? And he's like, yeah, I got a 97%. And then like we look at his paper, and we're like, oh, but wait, and we're looking through the question that he got wrong because it's one question. And then we also realize, I think he realizes before we do that, like, actually he got it right, but the grader couldn't really understand because Raghu was using Einstein notation, which is like a bit specific. And so he actually got all the questions right. But he was like, yeah, it was hard. And I was like, man, get out of here. So he always makes it sound so simple. But like, it's just, yeah, I think it's just like that level of like, I don't know how to say it. It's like we were talking about before the podcast, Priya. Like it's that extra level of like just
Hmm.
getting to like wrapping it all up is like, I don't know, it takes something
Yeah.
additional. So yeah, he does for sure make it look easy.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I wonder. Like Rajiv said, we were talking about it, and I said, I know a lot of people, like even personally, I've had a lot of courses where I get a 9 or a 9.5, almost a 10. But it's always that the last bit that's, I don't know, I don't know, Raghu, I don't know how you look at it. When you do like an out of out on all of these different exams, like what is it? Is it the same thing for you? Are you pushing a little harder? Are you, like, what is it?
Yeah. Well, I think sort of in what we do, like in academics, I think exams are just like preparing specifically for an exam is maybe not the right approach. Like, I think the
Hmm.
reason that, for example, I did really well in JE was because, well, two things. One is I started really liking the subject. So I was like, okay, there is this exam, but maybe I don't really care about it. I just care about learning the subject well. And it was helped by the fact that I have a really good teacher who's making it fun to learn. And I'm just learning it. And I don't really care that this thing is in the syllabus for the exam or not. Okay. I can learn it, so I just
mm,
learn it. Okay. The second thing is that we had this group of other three kids like with me who were we were discussing all the time. Like again, that social aspect kind of comes in.
Hmm.
We were talking, oh, I got stuck on this problem. How did you figure this out? Oh, maybe you didn't notice this, but this problem was really cool and this had a really cool solution. So I think like exams are kind of a bit um I would say artificial in some sense because what you really care about is like learning and knowing things. And if you have that, then the exam will sort of automatically you'll do well on it, right? In some sense.
Hmm.
So I kind of have that approach towards it, and then it just kind of works out.
Okay,
man,
so
Yeah.
I had exactly the opposite approach, and I can agree, I never got 100%. So like, I think this is evidence in both ways that like really, I think yeah, if you really enjoy the subject, it takes and
Yeah, but that's why I feel
study
like,
to learn, it takes
exams
it a
are a
different
little bit
level.
artificial because let's say there is somebody who in high school doesn't really like calculus at all, right? So
Right.
why would you put them through that exam? Like, there's no need, right? That person should be doing something else, like what they really enjoy. And especially in India, there is this culture of just exam, 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 which is sort of harmful to many students. Like, I got lucky that I liked the subject, I had good teachers, and but not everyone will like calculus, or not everyone will like Maxwell's equations or whatever it is. So I feel in that sense, exams create a lot of stress.
yeah, yeah, I hated calculus. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Do it.
I was
Yeah,
kind of
Yeah, so
agnostic to it. I was
like
like, it's okay.
everyone has their own likes and dislikes,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
they're
I liked
that's
video
completely
games.
fine.
I don't know if that counts, but
Hmm.
No, but you're right. I do. What you're saying is, it really depends on the kind of teachers you have and also your peer group. Like,
Yeah,
I started to enjoy calculus only after I finished high school, and when I had a peer group who was
yeah,
talking about where this even comes from and then where it applies in physics, and that's the
yeah,
first time I even paid attention. And also, it was a
yeah,
teacher. So I think, yeah, if you get lucky with, I don't know
yeah.
if it's luck. Do you think it's luck? Yeah.
It
Would,
is some amount of luck, right? Like if we didn't get those teachers that inspired us, for example,
hmm,
maybe we would not be here, right?
hmm, fair.
But it is also true that, you know, if people try hard enough, they eventually find their luck. So it goes both ways. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think
Okay.
people who are sort of a bit restless and a bit hungry sort of end up trying up a bunch of things and eventually they
mm,
get lucky. So it's not like you're just sitting there and luck will happen. you got to just try out various things, and something will click, right? Something will hit.
You've talked about how you do a subject or you study for the sake of studying the subject or
Yeah,
learning itself. Do you have like a
yeah.
long-term goal that motivates you, and do you think like it's important for researchers, physicists to have a long-term goal that motivates them?
Yeah, yeah, I think for sure. I think especially as you get more senior and more familiar with your subject as a whole, it's important to, have kind of an idea of where you want to go with your research. Otherwise, it's just infinite, right? Knowledge is infinite, and you could keep kind of exploring this or that. I think having certain amount of direction is okay, and but everybody picks a direction based on their own set of unique life experiences. What, yeah, just so for me right now in string theory, one motivating question is we've had like string theory around for maybe what 57 years, almost 60 years now, but we still don't have a fundamental equation that okay, I can write it on a piece of paper and say this is what string theory is calculating, or this is what string theory, this is like the fundamental equation of string theory. So we have that for particle physics, for example. I can write down on one sheet of paper, okay, it may be impossible to calculate with it, but there is psychological comfort in the fact that whatever it is on this piece of paper, and then working out the consequences may be well nigh impossible, but you have that starting point, and then people can push on it in various directions. But string theory doesn't have that fundamental equation or fundamental principle. And we've already learned so much from string theory without having that fundamental description. So, one can only hope that once we learn that fundamental description, we learn even more things. So in that sense, I'm drawn to fundamental questions like that. Yeah. So we
What's that
only know sort of
equation?
parts and corners of string theory. Like we know it in various approximations, in various limits, in various simplifying limits, but we don't know it exactly what the fundamental, even what the fundamental degrees of freedom are. Like, are strings really strings? Because string theory also has membranes and it has particles, it has everything. So string theory is just like, I think at this point it's even a wrong name to give this theory. But yeah.
It's an equation that you want to write on a piece of paper and Priya wants to write on an iPad, I guess. All right. Let's jump into slice it up or spice it up. So before I get into the game, I guess all of us have our spicy stuff going on. I got my hot sauce, the same one as usual. It's hot sauce from New Orleans, actually. So just wanted to show the
Nice.
camera. If you guys want to show your stuff too, what you got going on.
I've also got what I usually have. Am I doing this right? Oh, yeah, it's Thai.
Yes.
So somehow I feel like because it's Asian, it's more powerful than yours, Rajiv. I'm justified when I complain.
I
What
have
do
this
you have? Oh yeah, okay.
green chili pickle from India. So,
Wow, that's. I
yeah.
feel like both of us have less of a right to
Yeah,
complain. He's
that's true.
just straight up eating the chili.
Uh,
So this game, slice it up, spice it up, inspired by a game from the podcast Drink Champs. It's a hip hop podcast. So basically, I'm going to ask you to choose between two things, and the way you choose is obviously totally subjective. But even the criteria with which you choose them is also like subjective.
Mhm.
So it's not like it's okay, we have to go through a few of them, but it's not like a super rapid fire round. So if you want to think out loud or just give a quick explanation or whatever, feel free to do that. So you
Mhm.
could either say one or the other, or you could say neither or both. But if you say
Mhm.
neither or both, like you really can't choose, then you have to take a
Mhm.
bite of the spicy
Okay.
thing that you have.
and we have to
Okay.
take
And so do we.
yeah.
So do
Okay.
we. So the more you say both, the more Priya has to eat spicy things. So think about that.
Okay. Okay.
That makes for good content. I'm just saying. So okay, let's start with the first one. So Carl Schwarzschild or Roger Penrose?
Is it really that hard?
I would go with Schwarzschild on this one.
Oh yeah? What made you finally choose?
I don't know. He was just in the trenches. I guess that makes it unique. He wrote the solution while he was fighting or something in World War One,
Oh, I had no idea.
this black hole solution.
Yeah.
Wow. That's,
I guess okay.
that's an
Penrose
intense
has Nobel Prize, whatever. He has proved some theorems, but he was not in the trench.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. That's
I
pretty cool,
respect that
actually.
choice. Nice.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So the next one is the Bell test experiments or the double slit experiment.
Man, I'm gonna say both. I don't know anything experiment.
Okay. Well, why? How come? Like, is it
So
really
you-
that hard?
Oh, we're both fantastic, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think?
I think they both established some fundamental properties of quantum mechanics. So, or interference,
All right.
I guess, superposition and entanglement.
Yeah, there you go. So
I guess you can't
that's
have
why-
entanglement without superposition.
without superposition.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why, thankfully, because of those two experiments, I have a job today. So I'll take him. Okay, IIT or IISc? I know they're different IITs, so it's a bit of a strange
Well,
question.
Thinking
but-
about IIT Delhi? Oh, is that the IIT?
Well, this really depends on what angle we are trying to.
So pick an angle.
Yeah, what's the angle you're approaching it from?
What's
Well, I
angle is
guess
most
if it's for
interesting for you
undergrads,
personally?
if it was undergrads, it was definitely IIT because ISC doesn't have a big undergrad program. Whereas for research, it would be IISc.
Okay.
Like if you're doing research.
Now,
So I
you
guess
have
it's
to-
both.
No.
Yes. I like it.
I think Rajiv picked
That's
them
fair.
because he knew it would be hard to choose between them anyway.
I mean,
Yeah.
or I don't know who of
This
you
is not
picked.
Rajiv's fault. I don't know why I leave the game to him every time.
okay.
Not
No.
nice, is it?
Yeah, this is actually not the best idea, but it's okay. No, it tastes good though. I like the taste. It's just okay. Let's see how many more of these I can handle. How are you doing? You holding up okay?
No,
Yeah.
I'm not holding up. Okay, Raghu seems fine. I did notice. I don't know if you noticed, Rajiv. When you were explaining the game, Raghu took the last sip of his water. Like, oh, I'm not gonna need it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that like Punjabi confidence, man. Or I guess from Chandigarh, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, Stanford or MIT?
I'm going to say MIT
Oh wow, okay,
for my undergrad place.
nice. Oh, it's like a good experience and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, the LHC at CERN or the LIGO experiment?
Ooh. That's hard to choose. I guess both.
Okay. Okay.
Wow. Man, you can really handle your spice. I feel like I'm getting better at coming up with these questions as well.
Yeah. I would hope I'm getting better with the spice. It's just not happening. Yeah.
All right. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, CV Raman or Satyendranath Bose?
Okay, this one I can go with both because I use it every day. Raman I don't use.
Okay.
Raman effect, like okay, it's some experiment thing. I don't.
Okay, Dominic.
Bose, like the boson word is everywhere. We are like saying the word boson like I don't know 20 times a day.
Yeah, that I feel like it applies to a larger field, I suppose, right? I don't know, like a larger
Yeah.
set of physics fields.
Mhm.
Okay, Stephen Hawking or Juan Maldacena?
Oh, that's tricky.
It's an obvious answer for.
Well, maybe
Yeah, you
for
can make it
someone who's
subjective
a-
and you can make it personal as well. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be like. You don't have to be super strict, but yeah, up to you.
No, yeah, I would say both.
Okay.
That rated with one of them. What if Malistina watches this? Like, he's
But
gonna
it's
be
both.
upset. I don't think we've ever had so many boats before.
We have not.
No.
I think you have one more question, right, Priya?
Do I have another question?
I think it's the one you have, you ask everybody.
Oh yes, the
I
one
know
I
it's a little
ask
bit different.
everybody because yeah, this is because I'm doing my masters in case,
Okay.
and I want to know what the right answer is. But do you have a do you have a preferred qubit modality? Like which one do you think is going to win?
So it's
I can
not one of two choices,
yeah,
one of like n choices.
and yeah, and I can like give you the options if you want. Like we're talking about superconducting qubits, or
Hmm.
trapped ions, or neutral atoms, or
Hmm.
photons. What else
I
am
feel
I?
like I have no idea
Any
about these
centers?
Maybe then what's your favorite one?
Take your pick.
Even though you're a theorist.
Yeah, I feel like I could pick something at random, but it would just be like tossing a coin. So maybe I shouldn't say that because I really don't know anything much about these
Hmm.
systems, and I haven't recently been going to talks about experimental quantum computing and so on. So
But from a
I
theoretical
could pick.
point, there's
Sorry,
nothing. I mean, I
I
know
haven't been
it is
following
experiment because people
this.
believe now.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
something I have not been following. So
Okay.
So none of
somehow
them.
the
That's
Okay,
yeah,
but can I
that.
ask?
maybe I would say
How would you decide? Like from a theorist's point of view, what do you think is most
Yeah, maybe that's a good
like?
question.
Is there?
well, I think maybe like if I have to just say right, like the biggest thing is scalability, right?
Hmm. Okay.
Um, because okay, eventually you can make small systems work with maybe any technology, but something that will really become at like an economic scale will be something that's scalable. So, and I
Hmm.
don't know the ins and outs of what makes something scalable, something not scalable, because these are very specific kind of technologies. So it's hard for me to have an informed opinion about this.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
I
No.
think that means
I
that
mean,
we're taking another
Yeah.
round.
Okay.
This is, I feel like Raghu is not disincentivized by spice somehow. Didn't
No, not at all. Like you seem to be doing really well. Do you eat spicy a lot, Raghu?
mhm.
Yeah.
I'm just literally sweating.
Okay. That's the game, right? No
Okay.
more. No more.
All right, that was it. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for playing the game and taking the time. I actually had one more question. So this was you talked about this a little bit earlier. We talked about this when you're talking about how you study for exams and stuff. But either if you wanted to add more or talk about something a little bit different in terms of you're a person that's worked and studied in many places in the UK, in India, in the US, and now you're going back to India. What advice do you have for maybe the younger students or people that are earlier in their career than you are in the physics world?
Well, yeah, for people who want to do research in string theory, I would just say read Polchinski's textbook. Like put it under your pillow and just like read it and try to understand it. Or put your iPad under the pillow, whatever. But
Tactical.
I would recommend the two actual books. I don't know, that's just my personal bias. Um, yeah, just learn more, do calculations, um, come up. Don't just like I said, Juan and Ashok are both like really good at calculating things. So one should just not take things for granted and try to work out some derivations, details. Try to solve things for yourself. Yeah, and more generally, this is like some maybe overstated advice, but it's good to um, have an ambition, keep dreaming, stay hungry, stay foolish, that kind of thing. That's also important. I feel it's become a bit cliched these days, but I think it's still important.
Yeah, for sure, especially in the world we are in today with like all the specific
Yeah,
expectations that are maybe not related to what
yeah,
you want to do always, right?
yeah, in a good way. And I mean this stay hungry, stay foolish kind of thing doesn't have to manifest itself in you being completely restless all the time, but just having that inner drive to continue pushing, pushing your own knowledge, own understanding. Just keep furthering your own mind in some sense. Like it's like a struggle against your own self.
That's very well put. Yeah, I like that you qualified the struggling thing, because a lot of people do see it as is something that's not that nice. But yeah, it could just be
Yeah,
curiosity and awe and wonder.
yeah. There's this right. The ambition is kind of more like, okay, I don't understand this equation. I really want to understand this. I have spent a lot of time on it. I still haven't gotten it, but I will give it that one more shot, that one more time. That's what I mean. I don't mean go out and sell some crazy startup idea to a venture capitalist. But
You don't? Oh man. Yeah, I
okay,
think that's the thing. Do like one more time. Like, okay, fine. Like I could,
yeah,
I can get it. It'll take time and struggle, but yeah, just keep being like, you know what? Just go for it anyway, right?
yeah.
Thank you so much. This ended on a really nice, motivating note. But thanks again, Raghu, for doing this. And thank you so much, everybody who's watching, going to be watching. The music that you're hearing in the outro is by Himanshu Katara. And yep, so see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye, bye. See you.